This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
We've all gathered to pay tribute and to give the kavod achroin to Hai Gavra Rabbah, Tzadika Rabbah, Sorid Midar Hayashan, one of the Ziknei Rabbanim of our generation, one of the Ziknei Rabbanim of America, our beloved Zaidi, Father, Rav B'Yisrael, Zikni Moiri, Harav, Mordechai, Leib, Glatstein, Zecher Tzadik Levracha. I want to call Rabbi Tzvi Hirschwang to say a Kapitel Hatelim.
Ashrei ho'ish asher lo yholach v'atzas v'shoyim u'v'derech hatoyim lo yomad u'v'moishav leitzim lo yoshav ki im b'seiras adonai chavtzoy u'v'seiras so yehageh yoimom v'lo yilom v'hoyo k'eit shasul al palgei mayim asher pirya yitain b'itoy v'olei lo yiboil V'choil asher yaseh yatzliach lo yichein harishoyim ki im kamoitz asher tidfenu ruach al kein lo yokumu rishoyim b'mishpot v'chatoyim badas tzadikim ki yedei adonai derech tzadikim v'derech rishoyim toivein.
Call Rabbi Ari Leibovitz for a Kapitel Tehillim.
Shilam alo isis oinai alo ri me'ayin yova Ezri Ezri mi'madino yosei shamayim v'oretz al yitein lamoit raglecho al yonum shomrecho hine lo yonum lo yishon shomer Yisrael Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha yad yaminecha. Yoimam Hashemesh lo yakecha, v'yareach b'aloila. Adonai yishmarcha mikol ra, yishmar es nafshecha. Adonai yishmar tzeitcha v'yecha, mi'ata v'yad olam.
I'd like to ask Rav Moshe Tavialif, the Marda Asra of Agudas Yisrael Beis Binyamin, to give the very hesped.
Amma tells her, and Minigan tells us, there are never any espedim on Chalamoid. Having said that, there's the concept of Chacham Munach Lefanov. Zev Hobman and Talmud Chacham also was nifter on Sukkot, and they spayed him in Lakewood with 3 hours. So I'm putting tells aside, and I'm following what the Shulchan Aruch says. The biggest hesped on the rabbi is sitting in the front row. He's got a little bit of a ponytail. He didn't leave the rabbi's side for an entire year. His name is Perry. And Perry is really what Rabbi Glatstein was all about. Rabbi Glatstein was a tremendous Talmud Chacham. Rabbi Glatstein affected the Jewish people and the world. The Spedim today are not just about this Adam Choshev Talmud Chacham Muflig. It's a hesped on Sochachav. It's a hesped on the Malbim. It's a hesped on the Kloisenberger. Because the Groise Nifta built mikvois after the Milchama with the Kloisenberger. I've said this story over for thousands of people. The family certainly knows it. It was Yom Tif, and two elderly people reminiscing about their camp experience. Auschwitz concentration camp. Rabbi Glatstein, Zechet Tzadik V'Kodesh L'Voroch, and Rabbi Lachman Zatzal. We're standing, gathering around them, and all of a sudden, Rabbi Lachman turns to me and said, Der Yid ken davenin. Der Yid ken davenin. This Jew knows how to pray. They'd come back from the back-breaking work in Auschwitz. It was late at night. Rabbi Glatstein Zechet Tzadik V'Kodesh L'Vorocha. And I'm very guarded when I say Kaddish. Who tells Kaddish is on someone who was killed Al Kiddush Hashem. But he was a Kaddish because he lived Al Kiddush Hashem. His whole life was Kiddush Hashem. 80 years saying Kaddish to those that had no one to say Kaddish, those that perished and were killed by the Nazis, Yimach Shemam dying. Al Kiddush Hashem in the Holocaust. He was walking embodiment of Kiddush Hashem. He goes to the wall and he starts davening Shemon Esrei. And all of a sudden a Nazi, Yimach Shemam Zechram, comes in. Du Faruk the Yud, you crazy Jew, and he starts beating him and pummeling him to within an inch of his life, scraping off his face with his hobnailed boot, kicking him. He left him more dead than alive, battered, bruised. And the minute the Nazi rushed out in fury, Rabbi Glatstein picked himself up, walked to the wall, and continued, Borech Aleinu Hashem Aleikeinu Es Hashon Hazos, as if nothing had happened. Reminiscent of Ger. There was a Ger Chosed on his way to the gas chamber. And some of his friends were at the fence looking, watching, saying goodbye. He said, Gedenkshe Cham Panacht, fangt man zugen v'sein Talmud Levruche. Today we start saying v'sein Talmud Levruche. Ludicrous. In 3 minutes, he's going to be ashes. Aber medav bak and matzes. In Valorjan, they would say, medav bak and matzes, loyal to stoimim. What did Loit do when the whole world was on fire? Matzes off of a Pesach. Mebak matzes. Medavin Shemon Esrei. You give chizuk to thousands of Yidden. That was the Kiddush Hashem of Glatstein Zatzal. The Gemara says, David, a nusach of Shchiva, of going to rest. Hiniach Bonov Acharov. The Glatstein left wonderful sons, Moshe Yossi, Talmidei Chachomim, Makachi Shim Shemayim Barabim, Yossi of Smicha, Harav, Yossi from Rav Victor Miller's Zatzal. He's not gone. He's resting. The embodiment of his children and his Einiklach and Einiklach, Choshev Erov, Talmud Chochem, Ayung Goyen, all of this, Poshet Garet, this is Loy Meis. We're not supposed to be marach. I just want to talk to the family. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Menachem Avol, gave a birchas tanchumin to Yitzchok. Vayivorech Yitzchok benoi. Does he have to remind him that he's getting up from Shiva on his father Avram? Of course he knows he's his son. So to slonim et dvorem nifloim. Gimel shutfim be'odam. There are three partners in every human being in the creation of man. The Father, the Mother, and God Almighty, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ben Shem is saying, Yitzchak, you don't have a mother. You don't have a father. You become my full son. Yitzchak Benoi, now you're the total son of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes over the role of the mother and the role of the father. So to this noble family I say, it wasn't long ago we were in the airport with Levaya of Yechoshev and Mamenu, Yechoshev a mother, Tzadekis. And so your mother is nicht in der Welt. And now your father is Echetzadik v'Kodesh Levrachem. Is Echet nicht in der Welt. Bereshim is taking over completely. You're going to be his son. He will take full responsibility for everything. Yiddishkeit is quid pro quo. Tzaddik HaKoyim Lublin, a footnote that's all right, and a lot of Tanchumim, but the Makor is of Tzaddik and pre-Tzaddik. The Novi Zachariah Gimel says, Per Gimel, Kapitel Gimel, the Novi says, that I'm going to place you Mehalchim B'im Ma'ele, those that walk amongst those that stand. Dr. Tzaddik, there are two types of bruim, of creations. A malach, an angel, and a mensch, a human being. A malach has one tafkid, and la'ilmei lomim ad netzach nitzach, and forever remains at that level. There's no movement. A mensch climbs, he grows, he steigs. A human being can keep on proceeding and becoming greater and greater. When a person passes away, he's nifta, he becomes a malach. He can't move an inch. The sons are called bro kara davua, the knees of the father. Why the knees? Why not the heart, the eyes, the mind? Because after a father's nifta, and his noble children will say Kaddish, and the Eineklach will learn Torah, and the Ur Eineklach will steig. There'll be Chesed, Shmiras Haloshim from the boys, the girls, Ribik for Shamayim. You're making him ambulatory. Rabbi Glatstein that cell is so close to the Kivsi HaKovid, but he can't move any closer. The knee is the part of the body that gives you the ability to walk, to grow, to climb, to move. It's like you're taking your father and putting him on your shoulder and walk with him. And to see the Mesiras Nefesh of Harav of Yosef and his Rebbetzin Iti, I call her Iti, not of irreverence, but my best friend in my life is Tzvi Mishum Hirschwein, since I'm actually 4.5 years old. And his parents, Bez Hashem, should be gesund and have her for Shlema, Bez Hashem. And I know Iti. What they did for Rabbi Glatstein, their whole life they gave away to Rabbi Glatstein. Going to shul, guarding him, protecting him, spending time with him. And Rav Yosef was there, B'Yitzias Neshama. This never happens. It never happens. But Ashkocha worked it out, and Dickness Center, Dos, Jens. So you tell me, these sons, the family, inseparable from their father. And it'll stay that way. And you'll do for him, and he's going to do for you. Remember, I've gifted told Reb Shnei Kotler, who was completely devastated upon the loss of his father, Reb Aaron. Mehr was hatata deistivit in der Welt, des vasach mehr in jener Welt. More than a father can accomplish in this world, he accomplishes much more in jener Welt. So as much as your wonderful, beloved father did for you and the family here, it's going to do so much more. There are other Choshvei Talmidei Chachamim who, Be'ez Hashem, will give Divrei Haracha. We could write books about the nobility of the tzaddik and the way it was the tiferes of our kehillah and Rabbi Eisen's kehillah. And he would come in and people would come to him for brachas. And then fellas, strangers would come to me, take me over. He needs a shidduch, he needs this. And al small, Mashiach. Mashiach came to life. Everybody says, you must Mashiach. But you saw almost that he was going to be there and take us to him. Again, we're limited in scope and time. Should be a good better for children, daughters-in-law that are like daughters. Einiklach, ur einiklach, dershim ve'erochem. You should shep nachas. And the children should shep nachas from themselves, knowing they had such an incredible Zaydi, such a Gavra Rabbah to mold them, not with stern discipline, but with a shmeichel and a glint to his eye. As if the Goyin Zok, the concept of Mechanech is compared to a large kais surrounded by smaller kaises. The Emunah, the Shefa of Emunah and B'tochen and Simchas Achayim is infectious. Should be a good better that everybody should be able to cope with this. This is the amazing nature of Klal Yisrael. They're not tearing kriya. They're not sitting in shabby suits. They're looking elegant in their Yom Tov begadim. Melach nisht, mishmecheld, all totally in the Rabbeinu Shalom. That's how he lived his life. Boy chalenu Hashem alekeinu. The Nazis could put me in a concentration camp and kill my family. Boy chalenu Hashem alekeinu sashon hazois. What panosa was he asking for? Another piece of bread? That consistency, that resiliency is the hallmark of this very incredible family. And that should continue under all matzavim. It's Yom Tiv, Tzayis Yom Tiv, Mizit Shivim, Ad Shleishim, Ad Yud Beis Chaydesh, all totally in the Gvir, all totally in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Our emotions regulated and dominated by Hashem. What greater covet can there be for their father? Nafshi Tzurab Tzurachayim, Moch Hashem Hakim Dima Mel Kopanim, Harav Samek B'Nemarmei.
Call upon Rav Yosef Eisen, Rav of Rosh Kollel, Kollel B'nai Torah, Flatbush.
After the tremendous words of the Rav, there's not much that I can be moisef. He presented a picture that was so much makif that really was able to give us a small glimpse of the greatness of Mordechai, of the Glatstein, Sechet Tzaddik and Kodesh Levracha. Not only, as mentioned, did he fulfill a vow of saying Kaddish and remembering those that were not zeichet to the nace that him and his brother Heinich were zeichet to. But he became a shtick. He became a metzias, an entity, a vehicle of Yiskada Shemei Rabbi's entire life. When we were Zoicha in our shul to have High Gavra Rabba V'Yakira, his name was Mordechai Leib, he was such a balip de mensch. He didn't talk much when he came to the shul. But his presence, just the smile and the presence of this great man solicited such love and respect. It was mentioned before. The Rav mentioned how the Hashkacha had it that Rabbi Yosef, in midst of a yontif, in midst of not just a regular yontif of a sukkis or even a shvuas, but a Pesach, a yontif that you're so absorbed with your family. The Rabbi Shalom was, he drayed Hashkach El Yoina, that he should be there b'shas Misa. And in speaking to Rabbi Yosef, he said something to me last night. He said, my father was Zeicha to Misas Neshika, to a type of a Misa without a grimace on his face, without pain, without seeming distress. He just, ki'ilu, that he just gave just a small sigh, and the Rabbi Shalom took his neshama. And I'd just like to reflect on a malbum that I heard from my Rebbe, Rav Pam, Zechet Tzadik Levracha, that said over what the soid, what does this mean, Misas Neshika? And I think by this we'll be able to understand further about our great nifter, Rabbi Glatstein. Rav Pam was masber that Misas Neshika means that just like a Neshika, a kiss is ischabros. You attach yourself. Misas Neshika means that those that are able to merit this type of a Yitzias Neshama, what happens at that moment is that there's a kashrus. There's a bond that is created at that moment between HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kfar Yachal, and the Nifter. And through that bond, which is so powerful, it draws out the essence of the person. There was, if one would say, upon a person that you would know, who would be royal, who would be befitting for Misas Neshika? Could somebody choose somebody more suitable? You know, people as they grow old, the nature is you become grumpy. You become intolerant. That's just nature of people getting older. They lack patience. And it seemed that the exact opposite was with our incredible Mace. You know, he was nifter at 10:40. And since it came some Sachachov, it could be that the Hasidish Minyanim, Punkt at that time, was saying Hallel. He said Yiskadal v'Yiskadish his whole life, and he was nifter b'shas Hallel. When Klal Yisrael was saying Hallel, that's when the Rebbeinu Shalom called upon this neshama that he allowed to grace this world for more than 100 years. The Gemara says in Masechtas Megillah, on Daf Tesvav, the Gemara has a machlokes in what the pasuk means, Vayavar Mordechai. And Mordechai passed. He was machlef, he exchanged. The Gemara has a difference of opinion between Rav and Shmuel. One of the opinions is Vayavar, that they made a fast. That they began a 3-day fast on Yud Gimel Ba'adar, Yud Dalet, Yud Gimel B'Nissen, Yud Dalet B'Nissen, and on Pesach. And they fasted on Pesach. Last year, I remember speaking to Rabbi Yosef and asked, how was the Seder with your father? And he said, my father was Makayim all the mitzvahs halayla. He had all the kezesim, he had the arba koisis. He says it was just incredible. He says, could you imagine my father, at that time 105 years old, to be Makayim, all the mitzvahs, Kittikunai. But you know what? This year he fasted. No different than the Yidden in Shushan fasted. On this Pesach this year, just like there was a Tainus, he was Oila L'Shamayim. It was a Purim Dika, Pesach Dika Misa. He didn't eat the Shiurim, no different than the Klal Yisrael during the Nace of that year. He came up, and it was a Yischabris, not only with the Rabbi Shalom, was a Yischabris, Mordechai and Mordechai the Esther. But I just want to, as the Rav so eloquently addressed the family, in my house, when my children want to kibitz a little bit, they call me Tatashi. They just did it last night. I asked one of my boys, could he get me? He says, of course, Tatashi. Where do they even get such American boys? Where do you get such a musig? You get such a musig from Yosef Glatstein. Mamishi and Tatashi. What does Tatashi mean? Is it only like daddy, dear? No. It's much more profound, and it's much more encompassing. Tatashi means that when your father gets an aliyah, at least what I saw in Kol B'nai Torah, I'm sure in Agudah Beis Binyamin, he received many aliyahs as well. But when he received an aliyah, although we didn't see this, but my wife said to me, all the ladies all of a sudden migrated to the front where the windows are. Not only to see how this little man that was so small, who cast such a giant shadow, made the brachas, but what they saw was the hand that went around his father, that represented the deepest, most profound expression of love that a child could ever bestow upon a parent. The wraparound arm said it all, and that's Tatashi. That's Tatashi. But I must tell you at this time, as the Rav said, the Glatstein house should be a home that every single person who has Zeichen parents should go and be taught lessons, not only from Yosef, but primarily go behind the mechitza, build a mechitza, and let Mrs. Glatstein give the share. Not only for her own parents, that they should be well in Gesundheit, who we also had over the years the schus of having her father daven with us. But let everybody see what it means for a woman carrying such a major responsibility in the workforce to lovingly not only take care of parents at that time when they were in the home and run to their house, but to bring in in-law parents and to show and express a love that you weren't really sure if she was a daughter or a daughter-in-law. There was no chilek. When people say, "Oh, you're not my daughter-in-law, you're my daughter," many times it's just a zrikas and a plitas peh. It's a nicety. It's just a protocol to say. This was not a protocol. This was a metzias. There was no difference between a daughter and a daughter-in-law. The parents were Makadish the bias. If you want to go ahead and smell Olam Haba, walk into the Glatstein home. Because their house was no different than a home that carried Oren Bris Hashem. And as the Rav said in conclusion, Ein oimrim lifnei ameis el advarim shel meis. Rav Mordechai Leib as much as he spoke so few words, had such an incredible ability to just be able to target with such precision, with such words of bracha and recognition, and acknowledge that if you asked him a question, he was meishiv kehalacha, exactly precise. But there was one thing that he was obsessed with, and that was Mashiach. And if I might say, there's a Zohar that I spoke out yesterday in Shul, and the Zohar Kodesh being brought in the Haggadah of the Shemi Shmuel, Sechet Tzadiv Kodesh Levracha, who is now in his Seil Kinofov as well. He brings down a Zohar that says that a person in this world that develops midas and develops certain passions in ruchnius, he takes those passions and those midas and he brings them to the next world. And in the next world, there's no stopping. There's just going mechayil el chayil. Does anyone have a suffix that Rav Mordechai Glatstein is facing the Kisei HaKavod and Mashiach Tzidkeinu, and he's being Toveyim because now no longer is Rav Mordechai Leib your timid, older person. He's now a Leib. He's now 30 and 40. He's the Gavar Rab, as the Rav said, that built Mikvois. There's no restraints of body. There's no frailty any longer. There's no limitations or restrictions in his Gvura. He's that mighty warrior that brought him to Pittsburgh to be Marbitz Torah for decades. He's that person that didn't step away like Mosh Yodai Miyodai of the Heilige Kloisenberg Rebbe, Sechet Tzadiv HaKodesh Levracha. And they are now, Rav Mordechai could say, he was a Rotzu, Mordechai was Rotzu L'Roiv Echov. Mordechai Leib Glatstein wanted to bring out greatness. He was Rotzu L'Roiv Echov. He was always looking, Hu HaGever. He was the man that his words were such words of sweetness. Anyone that came to get a bracha, he made them feel so good. Not at age 30 and 40, at age 100 and 102. You walked away exhilarated. You walked away uplifted from just being in his mechitza, seeing the smile. He was truly Mordechai Rotzui L'Roiv Echov. The vision of Mordechai Glatstein was to see everybody in their greatness. We should be Zoicha. The Rabbi Shalom could give the family the strength to be able to carry on and take nafshay tzur b'tzurachayim umach Hashem dima mikol al kol pan.
Call upon Elio Moshe Glatstein, grandson of the Nifter.
Nafla Teres Roshenu. It's hard to convey the tremendous ahava that Zadie had for all of us, and we had for Zadie. When Zadie came to live with us 3.5 years ago, I couldn't believe it. My whole life, I got to see Zadie. A yontif here or there. Summer maybe, his family simcha, but to be able to see Zadie every day, I couldn't believe how fortunate I was. Bubby and Zadie would come every single yontif. You talk about simchas yontif. That was the simchas yontif for Bubby and Zadie to come. I remember every Pesach, I would learn Shir Hashirim in the shul, and I would get shkoyach from different people, but There was nothing more satisfying than seeing Zadie being with Nachas. When Zadie came to live with us, 101, 102, 103, you would think, oh, he lived a long life, he's going to go on vacation. No vacation. Woke up every morning for Shacharis. He sat there with a magnifying glass, learning Tehillim. Didn't waste 1 second. Zadie had a huge hashbah on every single person that came in. You had to act a certain way around Zadie. You wouldn't just run your mouth. You had to have act like a Ben Torah. You couldn't just, that's not the way you act around a Talmud Chacham, a Tzaddik. But Zadie had that tremendous hashpah around everyone. Never a word of Musar, never a harsh word. A person could be at their lowest point, and you go to Zadie, always had divrei chizuk, divrei bracha. Every day was a new day. Every day was an opportunity for his chadshus, no matter what was done before. Even though Zadie lived through the most unimaginable horrors, it didn't callous him to other people. Pink Vaker, it turned him, he was very, very sensitive to every person's needs. It didn't matter whether the person was an Adam Gadol or an Adam Katan, from a Yid, a Haredi, Modernish, Jew, not Jew. Every person came to Zadie and they had tremendous ava from him, and they had tremendous chizuk from him. Just to keep it very, very makatzer, Zadie, I love you very much, and I'm going to miss you. And none of us could ever forget you. You'll be a Melitz Yosher, and Mir Hashem will bring the Gula Shalema.
Zadie, Zadie, Lama harachta yomim. We thought the day would never come. How are you zeicha to live so long? Your life defied all logic. Eichmann, selection lines, crematoria. You're pulled out at the last moment. Smuggling tefillin into death camps, with a gun at your head, nisim v'neflois every step of the way. In your 80s, the joke was you had the non-retirement dinner. At 85, you pledged never to retire. And then in your 90s, you would go every morning to the kollel for davening, for daf hayomi, returning home 3 hours after you left. Zadie, you said the hardest part about turning 90 was reading the Rashi Oisios in the Gemara. You could be at any shir, at any blot in Shas, and say along with the Maggid shir as if you learned the blot yesterday. Who could ever forget Zadie when you were Oile L'Torah at 98 years old? Kol mi shaloi ra Harav Mordechai Leib Glatstein Oile L'Torah ben meya shana loi ra kavod haTorah miyamav. You would think the man running to be Oile L'Torah was 30 years old, 20 years old, with such gevura, with such zrizus, with such avas haTorah. We all say we're the Am HaNivchar, we're the chosen people. Whoever never heard Harav Mordechai Leib Glatstein say the words, Asher Bochar Bonu Mikol Ha'amim, doesn't know what it means that we are the Am HaNivchar. You pen the words, Ani hagever ra ani b'shevet avrasai, in reference to seeing the Warsaw Ghetto, thousands of skeletons, littered with corpses, faces distorted, swollen. You described the rivers of blood. You wrote the words, how no imagination, no matter how daring, could possibly conceive anything we've seen or lived through. No language has been created to describe the enormity of the Holocaust. You are the one who penned the words, the yells of the women, the weeping of the children, their cries for despair and mercy ring in my ears till this very day. And yet, somehow, you emerged unscathed by these experiences. One would have expected somebody to be emotionally, psychologically scarred, to wallow in self-pity, but Zaidi, you devoted your entire essence, your entire life, to bring comfort, to bring solace, to bring chizuk, to zekenim, zekenois, almonois, yisoimim, choyle hanefesh. Zaidi was the chief chaplain of the state of Pennsylvania. And in that capacity, he would spend his days traveling from one institution to the next, from one umlal to the next, breathing life. How many thousands of cholim did you encourage in your lifetime? How many of these people lived years, decades longer because every day you and Bubi would wheel them into shul, put talis on them, put tefillin on them, bring them to meals? How did you do this? Zaidi, what were you made out of? To live 105 productive years, vibrant years. Zaidi, no language has ever been created to capture the greatness of your lifetime. Bama harachta yamim. How did you do this? Tzadik be'emunasa yichya. Your emunah, the Ribbon Shalom, was your best friend. The Ribbon Shalom was a tangible reality to you. Zaidi was once interviewed after the war, and he was asked, Rabbi Glatstein, you're the eyewitness of the atrocities to your people. You saw your family massacred, your nation butchered. Did you at any point in time lose faith in the promises of the Torah? Did you at any point in time lose faith in your God? And Zaidi said, did I lose faith? Sure, I lost faith. I lost faith in man. How could a civilized society like Germany shed their conscience and butcher an innocent people? How could England, the United States, Roosevelt, who knew where Auschwitz was and bombed the perimeter, how could they ignore what was happening? So yes, I lost faith in man, but never for a moment did I lose faith in my God. My faith in the Ribbon Shalom only became stronger. Who can fathom the soaring faith of this tzaddik? Who can imagine the majesty of this neshama? Anyone who saw Rabbi Glatstein immediately understood what it meant. Elokai, neshama shenasata bi tahirahi. Zaidi, today there's a great simcha in Shamayim. It's a big Yom Tov today in the Shamayim. There's a Kabbalas Panim like there never was. Beroisham, David HaMelech. David HaMelech says in Tehillim, Va'ani Sefila, and I am prayer. What does that mean? What did David mean in I am prayer? Could we begin to explain what those words mean? But anyone who knew Zaidi didn't have to explain what those words mean. They understood intuitively. Zaidi, you taught us what it meant. Va'ani tefillah. You personified tefillah. You lived tefillah. One time I had the zechus to go to Eretz Yisrael. Zaidi and Bubby took us to Eretz Yisrael. And Zaidi was saying Tehillim on the plane the entire flight. And he turns to me and says, Dani, see this pasuk? This is my life. Ki chilatzta nafshi mimaves. Es eini min dima, es ragli midechi, es halich lifnei Hashem be'artzois hachayim. The Rebbeinu Shalom saved my soul from Maves, and now I have the great privilege to walk before the Rebbeinu Shalom in Eretz Yisrael. How many hundreds and thousands of times did Zaidi complete Sefer Tehillim b'devekus atzuma shelohaya me'olam? So David HaMelech is coming to be Makabel upon him. The Malbim. How attached you were to the Malbim. Did a day go by? Did a conversation go by that Zaidi didn't mention the Malbim? All of Zaidi's Malbims on Mishlei, on Eoiv, on Yeshaya are annotated, notated with chidushim and notes. Zaidi's Mishlei, he has chidushim of how to counsel people al-pi psychology based on the Malbim on Mishlei. And Zaidi's favorite was Shir Hashirim. Zaidi said every year from the Ger Rebbe that Shlomo HaMelech said the first parak of Tehillim and his soul ascended, the first rung of heaven, and then he descended. And then he said the second parak of Shir Hashirim, and then Shlomo HaMelech came down. Until Shlomo said the seventh and final parak of Shir Hashirim, and his neshama went up to the Kisei HaKavod. Zaidi, you too, after Klal Yisrael completed Shir Hashirim the night of the Seder, your Heilige Neshama also ascended to the Kisei HaKavod in the seventh and final parak of Shir Hashirim. On one occasion, we went to Pittsburgh. We visited Zaidi and Bubby about 5 years ago. And Zaidi comes, he sees walking into the room, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. And he was so overcome with emotion, he had a flashback to his first day in Auschwitz. And Zaidi said that when he came to Auschwitz, he heard the Zakanim were crying, who's going to say Kaddish for us? Who's going to say Kaddish for us? And Zaidi said, I thought to myself, who's going to say Kaddish for me? I'm not even married. I don't have children. And now, Doiros, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. For 75 years, Zaidi said Kaddish for the 6 million Shachris, Mincha, and Marav. He didn't miss one Kaddish. In the Shamayim now, there's a Kabbalas Panim, there's a Yom Tiv, there's a Simcha in the Shamayim, and all 6 million Kadoshim are greeting Harav Mordechai, Leib, Glatstein, and they're saying, Yasher Kaichacha. And as it was mentioned, Zaidi built yeshivas in the DP camps, mikvahs, Beis Yaakovs. He distributed Sfarim, Sifrei Torah, mezuzos. But in his most sacred and important task, as the head of the religious department of the Joint Distribution Committee, Zaidi took on the role of finding relatives of all the survivors, otherwise they couldn't come to America or Eretz Yisrael. And he did not leave Europe until every last survivor was able to either come to the United States of America or come to Eretz Yisrael and rebuild their lives. The renaissance of Torah we see today in America, in Eretz Yisrael, Zaidi had so much nachas from because he understood these were his peiros. And then there's a great Kabbalas Panim. Bobby is coming out to greet Zaidi. Was there ever in the history of the world such a kiddushin, such a marriage like Zaidi and Bobby? Kisamechacha yitzircha beganed and mikadem. I don't know what Olam Haba smells like, but if you went to Zaidi and Bobby's house in Pittsburgh, you smelled the reach of Gan Eden. I want to take the occasion to thank my parents, my dear mother. Where is Zaidi going to go after the Shiva? Mommy said Zaidi's coming straight from the last day of Shiva in the morning. Put him in the car, put him on the plane, tell him you're packing a few things. He's just coming for a visit and never turning around. There was never a question. There was never a doubt. That was Mommy's decision. And she was zoicha to bring the Oren HaKodesh and transform the Bayis into the Beis HaMikdash. We also are eternally indebted to Perry, who's part of the Mishpacha. If you need to know some good Sachachav Negunim, just ask Perry. Perry will share all the family secrets, and the Creator should bless Perry with good health and happiness for his dedicated service. As was mentioned, everyone talks about Mashiach. Zaidi lived Mashiach. For Zaidi, Mashiach was like making an order, and Amazon says it's coming today or tomorrow, 50-50. That's how Zaidi waited for Mashiach. It was a reality. It's here. It's coming. Tzion hi, doiresh ein la, meklal deboy drisha. You have to be doiresh Tzion. Ask Reb Chaim Kanievsky, how are you doiresh Tzion? You have to be toiveya. Zaidi was Toiveya, the Mashiach. He was Metzape Legeula more than anybody I know. But Zaidi says we're going to take it to the next level. B'nisan nigalu v'nisan asidan ligoel. Says the Medrash Tanchuma, b'tesvav b'nisan nigalu u'v'tesvav b'nisan asidan ligoel. So Zaidi says, I'm going to go straight up to the Kisei HaKavod on Tesvav Nisan. And I'm not going to rest, and I'm not going to stop, and I'm going to be Toiveya. During the heat of Corona, we said, Zaidi, be mispalel for the disease to end. And Zaidi said, no. I'm going to be mispalel for the Geula. When the Geula comes, that we don't have to be mispalel for the disease to end. Zaidi is sitting by the Kisei HaKavod. He's the guarantor. He's the Arev. He says, Ribono Shel Olam. B'tesvav b'nisan nigalu. U'b'tesvav b'nisan asidan ligoel. And now he will fulfill the full meaning of Ki chilatzta nafshi mimaves es eini medima es ragli midechi. To be laid to rest on the yahrzeit of his Heilige Rebbe, Reb Menachem Zemba, who he was together with on Pesach 78 years ago. On Chol Hamoed Pesach, on the day he will be interred on Har HaZeisim, Zaidi will be reunited with his Heilige Rebbes, with Bubi, with all the Kedoshim. Yizichroi Baruch, Hinishmasoi Tzrura B'tzor HaChayim, Bila Mavas Lanetzach, U'malcha Hashem Leikim, Dimamei Al Kol Panim. Call upon Dr. Yitzchak Glatstein, son of the Nifter.
The speakers before me, it is a nigh impossible task to add to what they've already said about the years that my father endured during the terrible, terrible Milchama. Much has been written, much ink has been spilled by others, by Tati himself with his hundreds of articles that he tried to describe horrors that we can only imagine. In fact, I located late last night, early this morning, a translation of a death march that Tati took in the final days of the war. And Tati wrote, it was April 1945, it was Pesach. He was one of only a few hundred prisoners who survived the death camps, and the Nazis still wouldn't let go of them and brought them through unspeakable horrors in a death march. And Tati summarized it by saying, like the Gemara said in Eruvin, even when the Rishayim are by Sharei Gehenim, they still don't do tshuva. But yet somehow Tati survived. He met Mommy. They got married. And they lived a very, very nice life in Pittsburgh for many, many decades. And then, of course, the speakers ahead of me, before me, spoke about how Eitan Yossi took them in and what a special time it was. I want to talk about a little bit of a different period. I want to talk about what was life like during those decades in Pittsburgh in the 1960s, in the 1970s, in the 1980s, when I was just a kid growing up in Pittsburgh, the city of champions, the Steelers, the Pirates. That's what a kid growing up sees, but his parents didn't have any interest in football. They didn't have any interest in sports. Their main focus in life was always Yenim, taking care of other people. It was never about them. I used to joke, it wasn't really a joke with my kids, what are we going to do, Chol Hamoed? We'll go here, we'll go there. And they asked me, Daddy, what did you do Chol Hamoed in Pittsburgh? I said, I had a little bit of a different Chol Hamoed experience. I would go to the state hospitals where people were Chaylei Nefesh. People were not well. Those were the days before the medications, and you couldn't let these people out on the streets. They were locked in wards. And Tati would take me there, and of course he took Yossi there as well, when Yossi was in Pittsburgh, and he would speak to each one of them, even though you could see they were tormented souls. And he would administer to them, and he would tend to them gently and speak to them just like they were regular people and treat them with respect that they probably never got in their lives. from anyone except from Tati. That was my Chalamite trip. That was my Chalamite amusement park. But I didn't miss it because I was with Tati. I found, as you know, they both were walking Kiddush Hashem. They were walking Mesilas Yesharim. They were living Sifrei Torah. What tafkid is there of a yid other than to be Makadei Shem Shamayim? There's no bigger tafkid. I ask your patience when I read a very short letter that I located in the early hours of the morning. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Department of Public Welfare, dated October 24th, 1984, the Honorable Thomas W. Jackson, Director, Commonwealth Chaplaincy Services. It's addressed to my father, Rabbi Glatstein. Dear Rabbi Glatstein, I learned this week it would be your last day as a staff chaplain at Mayview Hospital. I was moved by this information and took time to reflect on it. Now remember, this guy was a galach. He was the chief priest of all the different state hospitals in Pittsburgh. And he continues, Rabbi Glatstein, your career as a state mental health chaplain has spanned many years and many decades and at various times reached across many hospitals. The multitudes of Jewish people to whom you have administered have been enriched by your presence. The many other persons, not of the Jewish faith, whom you have come to know and with whom you have shared friendship, have been inspired and edified by your being among them. I wish to take this occasion to express my sincere personal thanks, to convey the appreciation of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and its administrators and its workers and directors for your many years of dedication in the role of the Jewish chaplain in our state hospitals. You have been an important part of the chaplaincy program, and you have admirably represented the Jewish faith, and your memory will be held in blessedness. And that was from an Eino Yehudi, after decades of seeing Tati working alongside him. And that was a little taste of what it was like to grow up in Pittsburgh. Never a raised voice in the household. Ani Meid, never a flash of anger, never a sharp word, ever. Only love and gentleness and kindness and chizuk, and especially reserved for Mommy, hushed tones, respect. That's what it was like to grow up. Walking down the streets of Squirrel Hill as a child was a tad annoying. It was impossible to walk down Murray Avenue without being greeted, my parents being greeted, by the locals. And they would stop and explain how happy they were and how grateful they were for everything that Mommy and Tati did for their grandmother, their grandfather, their niece, their nephew, their cousin. And as a kid, it got annoying after a while. But then I realized as I grew older that the reason they were treated like these local celebrities is because they treated every person like a celebrity. From the most chashuv people, to the janitors, to the switchboard ladies, to the servers at the home, everyone was treated with the utmost respect and was meant to feel special. And of course, we as children received that treatment as well. That's what it was like to grow up in the Glatstein family. You know, there's a minhag in certain communities in Europe that the aron that they brought the nifter to Kever Yisrael was made out of the materials that person used, and that wood was made on that person. So a shoemaker, they took his shoemaker stand. A Schneider, they took the stand that he used to cut the cloth. And I have no doubt that our kitchen table would be made on all the mishalachim that would come, and he would write each one out with a check. No matter who they were, what they were, he would offer them mezayne, shahakol, asked how they were, asked how their travels were, the many people that Tati and Mami counseled, the chassan and kalas that came into the house. We had several chassanas in our house. So not only would the kitchen table be made, the amud in all the shtelers in the Jewish home and the Torah's Chaim would be made on all the drushes and all the chizuk. And all my vision growing up was Tati sitting at the desk till wee hours of the morning writing hespedim for all the niftarim in Pittsburgh, all the niftarim, and each letter, he would try to capture the essence of that person. And of course, he was successful. So we have to be Messiah, we have to be Makatzer. So I have to, they say it's impossible to repay all the chesed that your parents did for you. It's impossible. Because your parents were there 24/7. So I don't have words to, anytime, they're always available my whole life. Thank you, Tati. Thank you, Mommy, for everything. Standing right beside them, it's impossible to thank Yossi and Iti for everything they did for Mommy, for Tati, all these years, especially the last few years. I'll just say thank you. And I also have to say thank you to my wife, Gitti. The last years when I was commuting back and forth to Boston, and she didn't see me all week, the kids didn't see me, and I said, Gitti, I have to go to Pittsburgh, and then she just go. Go see your parents. And I would fly from Boston to Pittsburgh at least once a month, and she always encouraged me. So, be Messiah, Tati, you'll be in Lichtiger Gan Eden, together with Mommy, and all your mishpachas, who unfortunately never went to Kever Yisrael, and Tinish Masai Tzura V'Tzura Chayim, and we takas should be Zaycha Tishim Mashiach Tzidkenu, Meher V'Yameinu Amen.
Call upon Avi Murray to give the very hesped.
Avi, Tata, Zisa Tata Shi. You were my life, my heart, my light. Anyone who knows me knows Avi was my pride and joy. The pride and joy of our entire mishpacha. Who am I? Ani Yosef, Ha'od Avichai. That's who I was. My definition is Ani Yosef Ha'id Avichai. Tata, you left me too soon. You think 106 years is long enough? No. Not long enough. Your last words. Your last words, the last sentence that my father, Hareini Kaparis Mishkavai, said was, I am waiting for Mashiach. Doctor of neurology came into the stroke unit. Rabbi, lift your arms. Rabbi, lift your legs. And at that point, my father still could do that. And Tatashi, the doctor asked you, what's your name? Rabbi, what's your name? And Tati, you said, my name is Mordechai Leib. And then Dr. Jin pointed to me right next to you and said, what's his name? Now, my father for my entire life always called me Yassi, Yassala, Yassashi. No. The last time he referred to me in the stroke unit of Maimonides, Yosef Menachem. He knew. He's Mordechai Leib ben Yosef Menachem. I said to you, Tati, effing up the Eigen. The doctor wants to talk to you. He wants to test your Tati, it's Chodesh Nisan. B'Nisan Nigalu u'B'Nisan Asidin Ligoyal. That was his penultimate sentence. The next day, Dr. Jin comes in again. Rabbi, are you tired? I am waiting for Mashiach. That was his last sentence. I am waiting for Mashiach. No. Everyone who knew him knew he lived first with the Rabbanu Shalom. He was never Mesiach Das from the Rabbanu Shalom. And zweitens, Mashiach. A few years ago, I think it was maybe on Purim, at Danny's house, he told me for the first time that when he was in Auschwitz, he believed every single day as Mashiach kimt heit. And he always believed it. Be'emunah shalema. And he would quote from the Grosser Rebbes, the Kotzker, others, Rabbanu Shalom, wir sind bereit. We're ready for Mashiach. You can come. Where are you? And the Rabbanu Shalom wanted to take him to his Neshama Tahira on Tesvav Nisan to be Nehenem Ziv Hashchina. Hai Gavra Rabba Avinu Moreinu V'Rabbeinu Harav Hatzadik Rav Mordechai Leib ben Yosef Menachem Hareini Kaparos Mishkavai Rav Ha'olim L'Torah U'Seuda Ish Ha'Ashkolais U'Ba'al Midos Niskavais Safra Rabba Ohov Lamala V'Nechmad Lamata Derachav Darchei Noyam V'Chol Nesivaisav Shalom. Those words come from the Mechaber of the Sefer. Parshas Gedulas Mordechai. Tata, your message was always one of emunah and encouragement. When the most dire conditions ever visited on anyone in the history of this world, mitchilosai vatsaifai, were visited upon you, you emerged victorious. You are ud mutzal meyesh. You are the living, because tzadikim v'misasam kruyim chayim. You were the emblem of Klal Yisrael's Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker. You were filled with the Ruach Elokim to rebuild the shattered world and to be Mekarev Liban Shel Yisrael Lavinu Shebashamayim. And as Rabbi Dani mentioned, after the war, he met my mother, Aleh Shalom, Sina Volman, the daughter of the last Admar Misachachav, the last Av Basin of Sachachav, Rabbi Huda Leib Volman, Hashem Yikom Damai, who would not leave the Warsaw Ghetto, even though he had an opportunity to do so. He would not leave his Kehillah. And my father met her in the DP camp, Feldefink. My father had been liberated from Dachau. He was given an opportunity to shoot the Germans. General Bradley gave him a gun. Rabbi, kill them. You could take revenge. The world press is not here now. They're not here yet. They will never know. And Tata, you declined the offer. Tata, what you said was, I leave revenge to the Rabbanu Shalom. I have my freedom. My freedom is to be reunited with the Gemara. How many days and nights was my father Mefaltel in Auschwitz, in Dachau, in Bergen-Belsen, with the Gedolei Yisrael? That was the true meaning of Torah Sheba'al Peh. That's what kept them alive. My father always told me what kept them alive also? The words of Yeshaya Hanavi, the words of Nechama, that were so close to him, with Perish HaMalbim. Mordechai Leib ben Yosef Menachem, Rashi Tevois Malbim. And his great Zayda, who was the Rav in Linschitz at the time that the Malbim came to Linschitz, was a Yedid Neman, together and confident of the Malbim. Tata, you used to be Mefalpel with the Imrei Emes, with the Gerer Rebbe, Rabbi Avram Mordechai, and you showed him the Malbim's parish on Shir HaShirim, Shirei HaNefesh. And the Gerer Rebbe said, this was a matana min hashamayim, Rav Mordechai, that you would show me and that you would explain to me. When I was 18 years old, one summer my father learned with me Shir HaShirim with the parish of the Malbim, Shirei HaNefesh. To this day, that remains one of the great highlights of my life. You see, he wasn't a regular father. He didn't go outside in the backyard and play baseball with me. No, as a matter of fact, for many, many years, Tata used to joke. My father, by the way, had a great sense of humor. Am I right, Perry? Perry's laughter filled up the house. And when Ellie would come and talk to Zaidi, his jokes were fantastic. But my father would say, you know, when Yossi was a little boy, I made a deal with him. The deal was I would teach him via I learned Gemara, and he would teach me sports. But you know what happened? He learned Gemara, but he never taught me how to play sports. That was my father's joke. Majesty and humility, royalty and humbleness before the Rebbeinu Shalom would never ever speak about himself. What I know about his early days of yeshivas for other people, he was called the Eloi from Plotsk. He knew so many hundreds of Dafei Gemara Baal Peh, as Rav Daniel Yaakov alluded to. He would go Biziknusai. Actually, when he was a much younger man of 101 and 102. He would go every day to the Daf Yomi at the Carlo in Pittsburgh, given by Rav Levi Langer, one of the great Lamdanim, and Rav Levi would say the Daf, but my father, it was shkura b'fiv. It didn't matter where it was from, which seder, and he would say it along, and he would teach it. And sometimes people told me they didn't know who exactly was giving the daf. Was it Levi Langer, or was it your father who was giving the daf? He was old school. He would say the Gemara along with the Magid Shir. La'olam yashlish adam es limuda. My father was mekayim this. Gemara, Sifrei Chasidus, Sifrei Tanakh, Chaf Daled Sifrei Kodesh. You could say any pasuk, the most obscure pasuk from Treyasar, and my father would tell you where it is, what it was from. Not too long ago, right before COVID, it's raining. My father wants to go to shul. It's raining. It's pouring. We're going around the corner to Rabbi Eisen shul, and I would say, Tati, you can't go. It's v'nishmarta ma'od lenafshoy seichem. And he would say, lenafshoy seichem. That's the emphasis. And we were able to persuade him not to. My father said, if anyone ever did him a favor in life, he would never forget it. He would always be makir tov. So I am certain that he vests in me the authority to thank certain individuals. And I want to, on behalf of my Tatashi, I want to thank the Gdolei Harabanim who were here, who were mechabed him, Moshe Tuvia Leif, Shlita, this is Mordechai of Agus Yisrael Beis Binyamin, and Harav, Rabbi Yosef Halevi Eisen Shlita, the Rav and Mordechai of the Kailo B'nai Torah, and his own grandson, he was so proud of, Rav Daniel Yaakov Glatstein, as well as the Kehilos that were so kind to him when whether it was Agus Yisrael Beis Binyamin, the Kehila Kailo B'nai Torah, Kehila Magid Harakia, everyone treated him with such kavod. When he went up to the Torah, it was, as Yedidi Ahuvi Rabbi Eisen mentioned, when he went up to the Torah, it was really something to see. As Yedidi Rav Leif mentioned as well in other aspects. I remember once my friend Mendy Stern said, Yossi, when your father goes up to the Torah, the way he approaches it and the way he makes the bracha, you could chabtzach hashrek. It's so moving. And afterwards I said, Tatashi, my friends are nispile at the way you go up to the Sefer Torah. And he said, when I go up for an aliyah, It's like I'm going to Mamad Har Sinai to be Makabel the Torah. And my Chavrusa, the Gavai, Elchanan Hamada, can testify to that, what that is like. Sipiso Lishua. Every day he believed Mashiach is coming. The Rosh and Shamayim now, greeting him, the Malbim, the Kloisenberger Rebbe, his great Rebbe Reb Nachum Zemba, Reb Shlomo David Kahana, who gave him smicha, the Rav of Varsha, the Tzaddik of Ranana, the Ben Lo Ashri, Bracha Mishuleshes, Harav Yitzchak HaKohen Huberman, who gave him smicha, the Imre Emes, the tens of thousands of Yidden that he reunited, Lahachzik Leib Nidkoyim, the Sheres HaPleta, Zekenim, Zekenois, Tati, you were Raya Neman to all of your Kehilos. First in 1950, you were inaugurated into the Taras Chaim Shul in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You were offered a job in synagogues, Kivyachol, in Philadelphia for 5 times as much money. Chas v'shalom, you would never consider such a thing. You came straight. Why did you come? You would not leave Europe until every last Yid had a passport, had a visa to go to America, England, Palestine, wherever it was, until finally, in 1949, the Mamashi said to you, Mordechai, it's shoin sat. There's nobody left. And Tati, in your inimitable way, you said, Sinala, ihr seid gerecht. And they got passage to Pittsburgh, where my father had the job. Had an offer from the Taras Chaim Shul. And at the same time, he was a Raya Neman at the Taras Chaim Shul, and then at the Jewish home in Pittsburgh, and ultimately the Riverview Jewish Center, where he was Rabbi Emeritus. And at the same time, Tati, you were appointed by the governor of Pennsylvania to his cabinet, the Secretary for Aging and Mental Health, and then you were elected Chief Chaplain of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And as my brother Yitzchak so eloquently depicted for us, I remember as a little boy going out to the rolling hills of Appalachia, the Allegheny Mountains, beautiful country. In Pennsylvania, they call it God's country. And for some reason, they have more of these institutions per capita in Pennsylvania than anywhere else. Not because there are more crazy people in Pennsylvania, but there was a budget for that. They understood the chashivas. And I would go there, and it didn't matter, Yehudi, Lo Yehudi, Lavan, Shachar, Tonkala, the dignity that he gave these people. I remember playing in his office, and he would bring people in to counsel them. And I was always struck by the softness and the way that he was mechaya these people and restored them. And he spoke al-Liban. And how many times, I could be made, people, lo Yehudim, shchorim, all ethnicities, would come to him and say, Rabbi, convert me to be Jewish. And what do you mean, convert me to be Jewish? Well, he says, because we see, you're the only Jew I know, but I want to be like you. This was not a rare occurrence. And Agavorcha, I want to tell you, I had the opportunity to be Makar of Yidden all over the world, 300 cities, Esha Torah's Discovery Program, worldwide program that brought back hundreds of thousands of Yidden. There is no question that the single most impactful stories and episodes on Liban, Shal Klal Yisrael, are the stories of Emunah of my parents, especially of my father. I would read passages of my father, of what he did in these places, in Auschwitz and Dachau, how after he was liberated, he became the translator for Supreme Allied Commander Dwight Eisenhower and a liaison between the United States Army and the Sheres HaPlata. And I saw it deep in the heart of Texas, in front of a crowd of many hundreds of people. I can't vouch how many were Yidden or not, that a Galach got up when I told him the story of how you emerged from the crematoria, and he put on a yarmulke on his head, and he said, "I pledge to become a halachic Jew." Just hearing about you, Tati, and seeing you, everything you did was to bring a Kiddush Hashem. But how much you loved the Mamishi. For almost 4 years, just about every day. Yossi, come here. Yossi, tell me. Do you know where the Mamishi is? At first I would say, Tata, she's with the Rabbi Shalom. But where? Harav. Oh, okay. Every day that he heard this, it was like Nischadish. He missed her so much. They were married over 70 years. He married my mother when my father came to the DP camp Feldefink, and he was Kaveh Beis Yaakov, and he saw her there, and he found out she was the daughter of the Sachet Shavar. She was 16 years old. And he said, when you're ready to start a family, keep me in mind. 2 years later, they had the Nisuin. They were in München. Rav Lazarowski, who was the chief Rav of München, later in Philadelphia, he was a Masada Kedushin. My mother writes about it in her book, how he galvanized the Sheres HaPlata. They had American rabbis come and senators, but their words were meaningless to the Sheres HaPlata. But the Tata lived through it, and his message was always one of hope. The Rebbeinu Shalom wants us to continue. The Rebbeinu Shalom wants us, yes, we all suffered losses, but the Rebbeinu Shalom wants us to get married, to rebuild. And he built mikvahs with the Kleisenberger Rebbe. Tata, people don't know because they know you already when you were already a Zaken Muflag. But I remember as a young boy, your oratory. I have heard great speakers. Baruch Hashem, we're blessed with some of the world-class speakers that we heard this morning. But to match your teichen, your passion, and your dvarim hayotzim min halev, I've never seen that since. Till the end, 105 and more. Tati, you never walked with a cane. You ambulated on your own. You had gevura. Every word that came out of your mouth was cogent, inspiring, full of chachma. Tati, you would want me to thank many people. But first and foremost, Kan Hamakim Lahaskir, the one person most responsible for extending Tatashi, your life, without question. The one person with extended your life, Tati, as you know, with so much love dedication, E.T. Glatstein. What she did every day, every hour, lo yeomen ki yusupar. There's no such thing as a day off, no such thing as vacation. You don't go on vacation. Yeah. She had the zchus, the pleasure, the kavod to take care of you, Tati, and you appreciated so much. Every thought, every day was to arrange for everything only for him, while holding a full-time job in a very senior medical position in New York's busiest hospital. You saw your first patient at 8 o'clock in the morning, you left the house 6 o'clock, you were getting up, E.T. got up at 3:30, below Guzma, to prepare all your meals, to have everything ready for you. Like a Kohen Gadol, doing the Avodah on Yom HaKippurim, Bifnayu Bifnim. And how much you loved her. I have to say, you didn't know anybody's name, you knew Yossi. But E.T., you called her the Malka. That was your name for her. So my father would say, my Malka, my beloved, Yehi Maskarech Shlema Me'im Hashem, Elokei Yisrael. My brother Yitzchak, the best son possible, how much you did for our parents for so long, in so many ways. E.F. Lefartam, Director of Reproductive Endocrinology, Harvard, the highest possible accolades of reproductive endocrinology, but you never did not have time, energy, in every possible way. And I know Tati appreciated so much, the Mamashi appreciated so much. My children, my grandchildren, Dani and Suri, always hosting us. Ahuva gave up her room for Zaidi. Everyone, Ari and Ilana, so many times you had Zaidi, the kavod that you treated him with, Yitzchak and Gitti, the times that you had him. And always being there for us. Eliyahu Moshe, bringing Zaidi daily joy, humor, taking away from your busy court schedule to take Zaidi to the doctor, even if you had to jumble around court appearances and trials, you always put Zaidi first. And your beautiful Nigunim, unsurpassed. Eved Ne'eman, Perry Ray. Perry, I'm talking to you on behalf of my father. My father had a special place in his heart for you, just like you loved him. Every night he would give you blessings, and those blessings will stay with you for the rest of your life. You were one of the finest individuals I have ever met in any walk of life. A gewaltige Balmidos. Never a harsh word, the slightest, between my father and Perry. Perry did everything with such dedication. We will never forget it, Perry. God will surely bless you and yours for the rest of your life, and you will always be part of our family. Finally, At the end, Tatashi, the Rabbanu Shalom gave you his ultimate gift. As Rav Eisen mentioned, he gave you the gift of Mises Nashika, and he gave me one of the greatest gifts of my life, that I was zeichet to be with you when the Rabbanu Shalom took your pure, holy neshama back to the Kisei HaKavod to be Nehene Miziv Hashchina. Tati, you used to like to hear me, Elaine. I'm going to conclude. V'chol masei sakpai ugevurasai ufarashas gedulas Mordechai asher gedeloi hamelech malkoi shalaylam halai hem kisuvim aluach libeinu charusim b'sichroinenu kavuim b'rayonenu u'b'sefer zichroinos melech malchei hamelachim. Tatashi, ich bete euch bechila on behalf of the Mishpacha, if somehow we were not noheg you b'kavod, you should be a Melis Yosher. You'll be reunited now in Gan Eden with the Mamishi. You should be a Melis Yosher for our Mishpacha, for all of Klal Yisrael, to hasten the Mashiach. Bila hamaves lanetzach u'macha Hashem Elokim dima mi'al kol banim.
The mace is being taken to Eretz Yisrael for interment on Har HaZeisim. The Shiva information will be posted soon. We're going to conclude with one parak of Tehillim. We ask everyone to rise. Mechtam leDavid, Shamrini el ki chasisi vach, Amart laDoinoi Adonai ata, Toivasi v'alolecha, L'kdoishim asher ba'aretz hema, V'adirei kol chavtzivam, Yirvu atzvoi samacher maharu, Ba'lasich niskei amidam, U'ba'lasa shmoisam al sfasai. Adonai menas chalki v'choisi, Ata toimech goyroli, Chavolim naflu v'animim afnach la shafra aloi, Avareches Adonai asher yotzani, Afleilois yisruni chol yoisai, Shivisi Adonai lenegdi samid, Ki mimini balemoid, Lachin samach livi vayogel kvoidi, Af besori yishkoin lavetach, Ki lois ta'azoiv nafshi l'shoyel, Lois yitein chasidcha l'roi shachas, Toidieni oirachayim, Soivasamachois esponecha, Ne'imais b'mincha netzach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.